moving into movies, we did have Michael come out this week. I saw this movie. I like Michael Jackson. Do you like Michael Jackson?
Yeah, there was like, especially in middle school, I don't know why, there's just a fucking chunk of time where I only listen to Michael Jackson.
Nice.
So I don't listen to him frequently. What's your favorite Michael Jackson song?
Ooh, it's tough. I mean, it's kind of probably one of the cliche ones of like Beat It and Billie Jean I listen to the most, which like they're the popular ones. But I mean, Thriller's tight too. Do you have a favorite?
Smooth Criminal.
Smooth Criminal's nice.
I love Smooth Criminal.
That's a good one.
The music video for that's pretty tight too. So
Dude, Jackson 5 put out some nice stuff too. Which this movie, Michael, directed by Antoine Fuqua. It starts out, and it's essentially kind of the first half of Michael Jackson's story, I guess, if you want to classify it as that. There's a lot of legal issues behind what they can and can't say about the later parts of Michael Jackson's life, because they initially planned on it, and
they filmed
they filmed it, and they had a lot of story beats related to allegations later in his life. Movie opened that way, I believe, and then some legal stuff came up and they couldn't do it, so they're
like, there's a slight oversight. We said you could. You actually can't take it out.
Yep, can do it. So this movie is really just the highlights of Michael Jackson, essentially. It starts out with the family, the Jackson 5 in the beginning. Coleman Domingo plays the dad, Joseph Jackson. Nia Long plays the mom. They both give good performances, if not a little stereotypical and kind of one note, and the mean dad that's, tough but fair, and the mom that's like, maybe we don't need to be that hard on him. We see the Jackson 5, which, like, hearing, like, there's a mixture of both the actors' voices in this movie and the actual recordings of Michael Jackson. But even so, in the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson's voice is fucking insane. Like, you listen back to, like, ABC or whatever the song's called, or, like, I Want You Back.
I Want You Back.
It's fucking unbelievable, and it just sets the tone for how talented this kid is. And then it gets into his later life, where he's played by Jafar Jackson, who is Michael Jackson's nephew. And to start off with my positives for the movie, Jafar Jackson is great in this movie. This is his first acting role ever. It's a very tough thing to come in to play your uncle, and to have the legacy and the expectations of not only all of the fans of Michael Jackson, which there are many, and your family as well, to come in and be like, all right, I have to pay respect to this, but I have to act like him, I have to dance like him, I have to sing like him. It's a very multifaceted performance, and I thought he fucking killed it in this movie. I really liked him a lot, and there was a certain point in the movie where I was just like, that's Michael. Like, I'm not looking at, oh, it's his nephew trying to play Michael Jackson. I was just like, fuck, it's Michael Jackson. And the highs of this movie are really it's the point of this movie, I guess, where it is kind of a tribute to Michael Jackson and showing how talented and how good he is and some adversity he overcame. And the concert scenes and the recording scenes in the studio, and all the other, some of the weird stuff where he's like buying monkeys and giraffes,
Bubbles,
and they have Bubbles the monkey, all that shit in there. It's captured really well here, and it's directed well by Antoine Fuqua. And I think that it's effective in telling its story. It is very much the music biopic of the rise, fall, rise. Well, however you want to show that in the movie. The formula of biopics: Bohemian Rhapsody, Complete Unknown, Springsteen. We've had a lot of them in recent years, but there is a level of enjoyment to it. And I was telling Mason before we started recording, I kind of went in as a fan of Michael Jackson. I was like, if you're not telling the like deep, kind of darker part of this character, of this person,
what's the point?
What's the point of doing this? And I kind of went in a little bit cynical. And then as I was watching the movie, and the people around me, just like families and friends that were there watching it, were like getting into it. Like when the Thriller music video scene comes on, which is a really cool scene, and like people are just like dancing in their seats a little bit, they're shaking their feet, they're raising up their hands, they're responding in like a respectful way within a theater. I was kind of like, fuck. It's kind of fun. It's a fun theater experience where I'm like, I'm glad I saw it in theaters, because I just think that is such a special point. Where we've had, documentaries and other movies about Michael Jackson, but not really to this level with this cast and with this talent attached to it. So I think it works in all those moments. Where this movie faltered for me was in its depth, which I kind of mentioned. It is kind of a standard biopic, but it is kind of a speed run through the hits of Michael Jackson as a kid with the Jackson 5, you see him and with the Thriller album, and then getting his music videos on MTV and all that stuff. And it's fun seeing all that stuff, but it doesn't feel like we sit with any moments. We don't linger with any characters to just like get how they're feeling. There's an attempt to show how, you know, fame can be very lonely with Michael, which is a big thing with, you know, some of these music biopics of what fame can do to a person. But we just don't sit with it enough, and it kind of goes through that for 2 acts in the movie, and then the last act of the movie is really just like a few concert scenes back to back, because I think a lot of that was getting into more of the allegations in the later part of his life. So it's a very interesting movie, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I think that it looks really good, it sounds really good, the performances were solid. Miles Teller was fun as his manager kind of later in his life too, and really just... I think the best thing they did in this movie was illustrate how big Michael Jackson was. Just hearing from at least like my parents and like my aunts and uncles of being like, yeah, we like sat down and watched Michael Jackson's music videos when they came out. And like everybody in the neighborhood did that just because it's like, well, it's a new Michael Jackson video. You gotta watch it.
Yeah.
And how fucking... This dude is one of the most famous people of all time. And just across... not only the United States, but across the whole world. He just had a grip on everything in the 70s, 80s especially. And just I think they illustrate that well in the movie of how many people are reacting to him. His concert scenes, there's people like passing out, and there's people just like, there's dudes crying like during the concert scenes, which is really funny. So it kind of just brought me into an era where it's like, man, we haven't really... at least in our lifetimes, haven't had an artist like that. There's big artists. There's Taylor Swifts. There's all kinds of big bands and groups that are hot for a bit and big, but to this level where it's like, if you say Michael, you're either talking about Michael Jordan or Michael Jackson, which is crazy. That one of the most common names of all time. If you say, you see Michael, you know which one you're talking about in the context of music or sports.
Yeah,
it's
Michael
like,
Neff. Throw him in there.
Shout out Michael Neff.
Yeah, he's definitely not on the list. But if he is, thank you. I didn't watch this week. This is going to be a relatively big movie, especially for a biopic. It's probably going to break records. It is about Michael Jackson, and yeah, he's a revolutionary artist. What he did for just black artists in the industry, getting his music videos onto MTV alone, that's a Herculean task.
Yeah.
I like Michael Jackson's music. Hearing that, like, similar to Bohemian Rhapsody, a lot of relatives, people close to Michael or Michael's estate is involved in the making of the film. It's like, all right, well, I feel like you guys are going to give it a little bit more of a sanitized approach. We're going to get surface level stuff, which is what sounds like is the biggest complaint that I'm seeing reoccurring throughout a lot of like critics I follow is like, yeah, this is the surface level formulaic greatest hits of Michael Jackson. Do we dive into much? Not really. We present some, and then we just kind of, oh, here's another concert, or here's another taping of something. So I like Michael Jackson music. I'm interested enough to see it at some point. I think you may have sold me a little bit more on seeing it in theaters as opposed to waiting for it on streaming, just because, I don't know, musical biopics, I've talked about it. It's not the genre for me. It feels a lot like the same type of story of the untapped talent is discovered, rides the highs, has some hardships that he falls on, boom, now we're back on top after they're able to solve them. And it's just like, it feels like that is the same kind of trajectory for a lot of these films. Antoine Fuqua directing this, that gives me some interest. I've heard nothing but great things along with the cast. I've heard the same thing that you mentioned about the parents, where like Coleman Domingo and Nia Long are great, but Nia Long and they just kind of have nothing really to do that's new. But I'm excited to see it more so than I originally was thinking I would be. And I didn't see it this week just because I was like, in my head, I'm like, a movie about Michael Jackson, a biopic about him, I'm like, that movie's going to be like 2.5 hours. Seeing that it's only like 2 hours and 7 minutes or something like that, I'm like, oh, that's actually like not that bad. So I will likely check it out, if not this upcoming week, probably just as it lingers throughout theaters, because I suspect that it's going to be in theaters for a long time. But I don't know. I'm interested. I've heard a lot of speculation, and I haven't looked into it enough of there being potentially a part 2, or that they'd have to make a part 2 if this movie makes enough money, which I think it will make more than enough money because it's Michael Jackson, and the people that are seeing it that aren't the critics are largely liking it because they're probably going in with the mindset of like, just give me the greatest hits. Let me see my Michael again, because we grew up in the 2000s, and I feel like the 2 celebrity deaths I remember the most are Michael Jackson's and Heath Ledger's. It was like those two that are so just ingrained as a child. Like, the world stopped when Michael Jackson died.
Yeah.
There are celebrities that pass, like, we have a lot of big, classic, legendary celebrities that keep passing away. And it's like, we get that tomorrow. With Michael Jackson, it was like, I remember news coverage of that for so long. I remember where I was when Michael Jackson died. Like, and I was a kid. Like, it's just something that just hit the world, and it was crazy. So, I respect the artist. I'm excited to see it. I think maybe going in a week late, being a little bit more susceptible and hearing more of kind of the critiques of it, yeah, it kind of confirms a lot of the issues I was kind of worried about. Like, all right, you're just going to sanitize it then? Fine, but you know what? All right, maybe I just need to take the cynic out of me, go enjoy just a fun time at the theaters with a good community, and see Michael Jackson perform well from the sounds of it.
I think this movie is going to be... It's going to make a fuck ton of money. I think this is going to be one of the highest grossing movies of the year.
Yeah, I think it'll be up there. I think we'll talk about like our summer predictions for box office a little bit later in this episode. And we started it marking it at May 1st. I'm like, if we marked it to this week, this would be in that top 10.
100%. It's the crowd I was with loved it. It just seems that people are loving it. Not to spoil it, I guess, not to do a Michael will return in Avengers Doomsday type of thing, but
is there something?
There's right at the end of the movie they say his story continues, and then they go into the end credits. So, like you mentioned, there's been a lot of talk about a follow-up to this movie, and I'll be curious to see, because I think this one worked well enough for me. And I assume that a lot of the same creative team would be coming over from this, which a lot of his siblings and his son are producers on this movie and obviously signed off on it. It's very easy, or it's easier, I guess, to do this first movie where it's like the highlights of Michael Jackson, like all the big songs and stuff.
Easier to avoid some of the hints of things, whereas that second part of that story,
how do you sanitize that?
Yeah,
how do you avoid that? It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know, because there's even parts in this movie too where like you understand Michael, and like I wish they would have dove more into it, where he's just very childlike and he just likes animals and he likes cartoons, and like he goes to the hospital just with like kids that are sick, and he's just talking with him. He's like, yeah, like what cartoons do you like watching? He's like, oh, like you have this stuffed animal, like that's so cool, like I love Mickey Mouse too. And like he's just a kid at heart, and he doesn't really relate to a lot of other people his age. So again, it kind of started to dive into that stuff, but it didn't fully, move into it. And I'd just be curious to see what a second movie looks like, what a second movie would be titled, Michael Part 2 Michael Again. I don't know, but it'll be interesting. For me, it worked. I feel like a little bit more than a lot of critics and kind of reviewers I've been watching, where I just, like I said, at a certain point, I kind of just let go of like my cynicism and like my critic mindset that I sometimes have in a movie, and I was just like, you know what? It's great to just hear this fucking thriller booming in the theater right now. I'm like, I'm having a good enough time, but it's not going to be a top 10 movie for me of the year. But I'm very happy I saw it in theaters.
Yeah, I do find myself, while I am annoyed with musical biopics, once I'm in to see them or watching them for the first time, once the music kicks in, I'm usually like, all right, you kind of sold me.
Yeah.
And that works with like Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't love that movie, nor do I think that movie got nominated for Best Picture. That's crazy.
It won the most Oscars of that year.
That is still crazy. Was it 6 or?
I think it was
nominated
4.
for 6 and then won 4.
Yeah,
just
3 or 4.
An insane thing for that movie, because like I think there are aspects of the movie pretty awesome.
Live Aid's great.
Yeah. But the movie as a whole, I'm like, it's fine. But once you get into the theater and you start to experience the music, and it just wraps you up in it again. So while I am a cynic and I'm like, I hate the formula, it's like once I get into it, I'm usually fine. There are some exceptions to that, like A Complete Unknown, I think is a great movie. Mm-hmm. Walk the Line, I think is a great movie. Rocket Man is, I think, what I would say is my favorite musical biopic. Do you have a favorite musical biopic off the top?
Probably Walk the Line. I just grew up loving Johnny Cash and that. So yeah, I mean, we've had a few standouts in the last few years, but this one's kind of like Springsteen a bit, and kind of where it's like, you've hit some of the beats, you did it okay, but didn't fully like dive in like I wanted you to. All
right, I'm gonna ask you one more question about musical biopics, and then I have a recommendation for anyone watching or listening. What is, if you could, any band, any musical group, or any singer, lone performer, whoever could have a musical biopic or have that treatment, who are you picking?
I think I would take Fleetwood Mac, because I think The relationship between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham is fucking fascinating. The song Silver Springs is one of my favorite songs of all time. And their dynamic within the band, and then separating, and then coming back for performances. There's a lot there that you wouldn't have to do the typical, like, beginning and end. You could just jump in at a certain point. I love Fleetwood Mac. They're maybe my second or third favorite band of all time, so that's what I would go with.
I'd probably say Sinatra, which is always like kind of a talked about thing. I think even Scorsese's been attached to that, or they've rumored that for so long. I just think like there's so much outside of his musical career of like potential mob ties or influences on stuff. I'm like, that's interesting, so dive into that. Or give me 4 biopics on the Beatles of every individual member. Do that. Actually, I'm interested in that in concept, but I'm like, this might piss me off. But my recommendation: there are some really good musical biopics. Arguably one of the best, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
I knew you were going to say that.
Fucking check that movie out. It is one of my favorite comedies. It snuck up on me, and I completely, glossed over it. I've always heard great things, and I think I watched it, 2 years ago when we were living together, and that movie is so fucking funny. It is so good, and it completely, dissects all of my issues I have with musical biopics, so check it out.
And the music's great in that movie. And the music's
good, and the songs are funny, and they're good.
Walk Hard. We can't say some of the other things, but
can't. But John C. Reilly's excellent in that movie, and Jenna Fisher is a dime in that. She's great.
Also, the Beatles scene in that movie is
also hilarious. So check that out. That is my biggest recommendation if it comes to anything musical biopic related.